Laura will do a roll call vote just like that, just so everybody knows who's voting. So next on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. All right, can I have a motion?
I move we approve the agenda as presented.
It's been moved. Did we have a second?
Second.
Susan seconds. Moved and seconded. Laura?
Kramer moved. Susan Pitts seconded. All those in favor? Brian Kramer,
Aye.
Julie Kontoniscu,
Aye.
Scott Lordson,
Aye.
Susan Pitts,
Aye.
Corey Venable.
Aye.
Motion passes. Next is the consent agenda. Are there any comments or questions on those items?
Yeah, this is Scott. I had one question. Just read through the previous minutes. Is the city attorney allowed to make a motion?
No.
Okay. There's a typo then we've got on, he made a couple of good ones, but on section K of March 3rd, you just got him making a couple motions.
All right, I will correct those.
Typo.
Thank you.
That's the only thing I saw.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other comments or changes? Not, I'll entertain a motion.
This is Scott, and I move we approve the consent agenda with the changes identified.
I second it. This is Julie.
Scott seconds, Julie, or Scott motions, Julie seconds. Laura, do you want to call the roll?
The vote, Brian Kramer,
Aye.
Julie Kontoniscu,
Aye.
Scott Lordson,
Aye.
Susan Pitts,
Aye.
Corey Venable.
Aye.
Motion passes. Next is public comment. We received 2 public comments, but they were on an agenda item. Those public comments were regarding Midlands, the Midland Depot. Those have been all emailed since it's on an agenda item. We emailed those to all council members so you guys could read those comments. Did everybody receive those?
Yes.
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 All right. Next, special reports and presentations. Matt.
Okay. How does this work now? Lynn, will you put up something?
Yeah.
There we go. Okay.
Report right there.
There it is. Excellent. All right. So you can go ahead and go to the second page. So last year I put this together for the first time, last year being my first summer in Baldwin City. And really this is just an overview of kind of how our summer went. And I told Glenn we would do this. I would like to do it more like November, December next year, as opposed to waiting until spring gets underway. Just so you can kind of have that recap a little sooner, as opposed to waiting nearly 6 months or so, or even longer since the pool closed. So you can kind of see the comparison in weekly attendance from 18 to 19. You'll see for the most part, numbers for 19 were down just a little, just because 19 started off so chilly. Our opening day in 19 was kind of our kickoff for the summer meals program. And if you remember, Memorial Day last year was cloudy and dreary and chilly. So that opening day was, but that's May for you in Kansas. You can get 90 like we had 2 years ago, or we can get 60s and cloudy and drizzly like we had this year. So average weekly attendance was down just slightly, but right in the ballpark where it normally is going to be. Obviously the hotter the summer, the higher the numbers will be. This last year happened to be just a little bit cooler and wetter than previous summers. You can see the highest weekly attendance there was our first week of the season. Lowest weekly was June 23rd to the 29th for some reason, and you see our total attendance for the year was at 14,369, and we were open to the public for 70 days in 2019, which is actually the same as 2018 as well. All right, you can go to the next slide. This particular page shows the types of passes that we sell and the number that we sold. Punch cards are hands down the most of what we sell throughout the course of the summer. We only sold about 32 family passes. 24 individual passes, 18 lap swim passes. The water aerobic passes, we only sold 1 in 18, so we didn't even bother to offer them in 2019. Scholarship punch cards, you can see we're down from 18 to 19. That's primarily because my philosophy on the pool has always been, if we do scholarships, we always scholarship at 50%. All the other programs we do at Baldwin City Recreation Commission, we scholarship at 80%. That's not to say we will not give a deeper discount than that, but that's just rule of thumb, kind of what I've always done in my career. And so you can see that the punch card scholarships were down a little bit, but it didn't hinder the sale of the punch cards overall. You can kind of see the rest, the employee punch cards and the gift certificates. So we sold a little bit more in 19, even though our attendance was down. So that has to do with uses. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see the uses. So those numbers indicate how many times a card was actually punched. And you'll see our general admission, just walk up numbers are always higher than anything else. All right, you can go to the next. If anyone have any questions so far?
No.
Okay, all right, you can go to the next slide. These are our swim lessons and what we offer as far as swim lessons go. Swim lessons were up for 2019, which is great, but again, it'll ebb and flow just depending on how many kids we have in the district that take swim lessons and how big certain classes are. So a lot of that depends on just class size overall. But you can see they were up about 13 kids from 2018. So this should be right in the ballpark of where we'll be for, well, I hate to make predictions for 2020 at this point, but you know, we would be, if we were to open on time, we would be right in the ballpark of this for next year too. All right, you can go to the next slide. Pool parties, believe it or not, I don't know if you know this or not, but we had actually 48 pool parties reserved this year. We had a little over 1,400 people attend those parties, average of about 30 people per party. We had 4, we do have the ability to host parties while the pool is open. They basically get that shelter kind of on the south side of the pool. That is theirs for the, you know, for the duration of the party. But those numbers are, those 4 parties are counted into our general admission numbers. So they wouldn't be counted in our pool party category. So we were up, there we go, that's fine. Free days, okay, yeah, we were up 4 parties over 2018. You know, just average a couple more people per party. Go to the next slide. And these are our free days. We do 3 free days throughout the course of the year. Memorial Day, the kind of the kickoff being the first one. July 4th being one, and the last day that the pool is open is also a free day. So again, you can see Memorial Day from 18 was almost cut in half for 19 just because of the weather. July 4th, I believe, was also, the actual 4th of July was a, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was kind of a rainy day as well. So our numbers were low. And then the last day, you know, kind of right on par with where we were with 18, up slightly, but right generally where we're usually at. But you can see overall we were down considerably for our free days in 2019 over 18. Okay. Baldwin City Recreation Commission does host a swim team. Numbers vary by year, just depending on interest. 18 we really peaked. We had 48 swimmers on the swim team. 2019 we dropped just a little bit. We had 39 swimmers. We hosted 3 meets in 2018, so you'll see the swimmer attendance and the spectator attendance will be lower in 2019. The league that we participate in, that league meet rotates every year, and I believe there's about 8 to 10 teams in our league, so we won't see that again for a little while. But it's a great meet. The championship meet's a lot of fun. Everyone comes together for the last meet of the year, and you know, it's a good turnout as far as spectator and swimmers go. So that's the drop from attendance from 18 to 19. And again, we host 2 swim meets in 2020. At least we're scheduled to at this point. Okay. Yeah, so in 2019, we introduced several new special events at the pool, keyed primarily to kids. We had a tween night, kind of your 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. You can kind of see the participants and who really took to it. The teen night was probably the least popular, but teenagers are hard to program for, but we're still going to continue to try to do that. Program to the teens, but your 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, and of course your 3rd through 5th graders. Mom and dads are allowed to come in if they want. We don't charge them to come in to hang out and kind of monitor their kids, but a lot of them just kind of hang out in the park or hang out in the parking lot. So kind of gives those kids an opportunity to feel like they're a little more independent. So kind of the younger age groups, it was worked out really well. The family night on the 24th, it was okay. We had ice cream sundae bar for each family that came in. We only had 14 participants. I think the weather had an impact that evening. In addition to, those nights are still kind of sports nights. Monday we're still big into baseball and softball. So you're gonna have a conflict kind of regardless of what you do in the summertime, whatever night you take, unless you get into later in July when baseball softball starts to retreat a little bit. And you can see the July 15th was popular with our 3rd through 5th graders, who also comprise our largest numbers of our baseball softball program as well. So kind of wait for the season to get over for those guys, and it worked out really well. Okay, you go to the next one. I put this slide in here to kind of show the impact that that the pool has on our youth. This lists the number of people that we employ, the number of positions we have, and then the total wages that were spent throughout the course of the year. So in 2019, we put $64,000 back in the pockets of kids in the community. A lot of that money gets spent at Quick Shop or Sonic or wherever they decide, but I think a lot of that probably stays here in town. What those numbers mean on the bottom where it says total staff, that means we have 46 positions at the pool, and those positions are filled by 28 individuals. So we'll have lifeguards who also are water safety instructors, water safety aides. So a lot of those kids will double dip, so to speak. They'll work 2 different jobs. And so a lot of those jobs have different rates as well. So a lifeguard will have a different rate than a water safety instructor, water safety aide, and so on and so forth. Okay. Yeah, slide back there. There we go. So if you remember, some of the previous slides showed the number of passes we sold. If you remember, family passes were pretty low. I think we only had 30-some family passes. So we dropped our price $50 for our family price in hopes that we can sell a few more of those. Individual passes, we dropped $10 from 60 to 50. Lap swim, we kept the same actually. And then punch cards, we kept the same too, because they're very popular and probably most likely will be our biggest seller once we open for 2020. So those are our price structures for 2020. And the next slide shows some different hours that we're going to be open. So opening day 2020 right now is tentatively scheduled for Memorial Day, which is the 25th. We're going to expand our hours overall throughout the course of the day. So we're going to open at noon as opposed to 1. So we'll be noon to 7 as opposed to 1 to 7 as we were in 2019. And then we did, as part of our community, our strategic plan survey, we did a survey with it. And a lot of the information we got back, people indicated they wanted the pool open later in the summer. So we are going to do that. We're going to keep our pool open on Saturdays in August from noon to 4 on the 8th, 15th, 22nd, to 29th. So the 29th of August will be our last day that will be open for the summer. So, provided we have the opportunity to get the pool open this year, which I'm optimistic. But again, we've listened to the citizens, and they wanted longer hours and for the pool to be open later into the summer. So we're going to offer that to them. Adult lap swim begins the 3rd of June, and then water aerobics begin the 3rd of June as well. So I think that's the last slide. Yes. And if anyone had any questions, I'm more than happy to entertain.
Any questions for Matt?
Well, it's certainly a sign of hope. So here's hoping that the pool can open in May. I know my kids have asked me that today. So
we hope so. And
Right.
it'll probably be a conversation we need to have later in the month as we get a little deeper into April, because I know the city looks to fill the pool for the first part of May.
Yes.
So, as we get a little deeper into April and we kind of get a grasp on, well, hopefully we can kind of get a grasp on, where we're at, and we'll kind of gaze into our crystal ball a little bit and see if we still look to fill 1st of May, or if we need to push that back, or kind of what that looks like. So, but I'll be in touch with you as we get later into April.
Okay. Look forward to it.
Great.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Matt.
You bet. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is old business. First item under old business is the resolution we discussed last week and the changes that were made to it. So Glenn or Blake, I guess it'd probably be you to address the changes that were completed.
Yeah, so we, after the meeting last week, we amended section 2 of it a little bit, and I've left open for the council to discuss and decide who it wants to vest the power of this decision making into. City administrator or mayor would be obviously the two choices for us. Under section 2, added the entire section B, which deals with utility billing and the deferred payments as well, that I think is going to be discussed here in a second. So that's really all the council needs to decide, is who they want to vest the power in. As far as how long it goes into effect, the way it's worded at the end is until further action is taken by council or the state of disaster emergency declared by Douglas County has expired.
Are there any questions for Blake on this?
Hey, Blake, this is Scott. Do you think that the wording in section 2, I think the intent around all this is to be able to do the deferment program, which is probably expanded scope of what the ordinance says? Do you think that this covers us in actually having the authority,
Yeah, I do, Scott. And in addition to that, under our current city code, let me pull it up real quick. Glenn, if you remember the exact section.
Yeah, you're talking about where we already have, the ordinance says that people can come in and work with the administrator on a payment plan. I think that's what you're referencing, correct?
No, there's a section in, Glenn, do you know what I'm talking about? There's a section in there that basically instills the ability for the city administrator to act accordingly. And I'm scrolling through here. Glenn, do you remember that section?
No, I thought you were talking about the utility section too, but you're not.
Well, that's what I thought the question was about.
Well, it is. It's.
Yeah.
I think we're just trying to move quickly around an ordinance, expanding an ordinance, and then not having to change it back. That's the intent of doing this resolution.
I think it does. I think it gives us that ability, especially with emergency declarations. You get a little bit more leeway there.
All right. Yeah, that's just what I wanted to ask. Make sure that you thought it would cover that. Then I'm good.
Are there any other questions?
I guess the second decision point is there any reason to make it the city administrator as opposed to the mayor? My first thought is the mayor, but I think that's the next decision we need to make.
Sure. I think that's just kind of council preference. I imagine any of the decisions that get made are, going to be made with the, information contributing from both sources. So I suppose the argument for city administrator is just he's at City Hall, full time all day, and I know
Right.
our mayor position is basically full time for Casey right now, but he does have other business as well. But like I said, I mean, obviously any decision that the mayor would make would come with contribution from the city administrator and vice versa. So 6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other.
Scott, I've thought about this too, and I'm okay either way. It might not be bad though to put or, just in case Glenn or I were to catch the virus and we're out of work. Because Glenn and I converse right now daily, sometimes hourly, sometimes every 15 minutes.
Right.
I was just thinking about that today when I was reviewing everything, that it might not be bad to have an or in there just as a backup, so we don't have to call a special meeting if one of us goes down with the virus, that the other one can step in and, do things. But just a thought either way.
Yeah.
Blake, how does that look to you to have mayor or city administrator?
I think that works. It certainly doesn't change anything. It doesn't have to vest the power in just one person, I don't believe, from what I've read. So I think having it city administrator or mayor is fine.
The only time it would matter is if they disagreed.
We never do that.
We don't disagree ever.
Never.
Just a bunch of dueling orders back and forth.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can make that change.
Oh, but we can go ahead and pass this tonight
You can pass it as amended.
as amended. Okay.
And it'll be called Resolution 2020-09.
So are we done discussing, or are you looking for a motion?
Is there any more discussion, or are we ready for a motion?
I move we approve Resolution 2020-09 as amended.
This is Brian, I second.
Susan motion, Brian seconded. Laura, do you want to call the roll?
Corey,
Aye.
Susan. Susan.
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Julie,
Aye.
Brian.
Aye.
Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is the utility deferment program. We talked about this a little bit at the last council meeting. Since then, I've met with the I met with Glenn. We kind of hammered out a rough draft of an application, and we brought that to the finance committee, and I'm going to just try to explain it real quickly, and then I'll let Scott kind of dive into the nuts and bolts of it. But essentially, it allows for any of our utility customers to defer their 3 months worth of consecutive months bills up to 12 months that are essentially financed through the city for 12 months to pay back with no additional fees or penalties or anything, to help give some relief to our businesses and our residents. So that's kind of what it goes around. And Scott, you can dive in and add in anything you feel necessary.
Yeah, I think pretty straightforward. Hopefully everybody had a chance to read it. I think the intent was to put a cap on it. And, so we discussed that in the Budget and Finance Committee, with staff, with our financial consultant, and everybody felt that a cap of $500,000 for this program would be supportable, really, in the reserve funds, operating and reserve funds that we have in the electric utility would support this. So I guess I'm not clear how we would actually communicate that, but we do need to make sure that everybody understands there's a cap. I don't think anybody believes we'll hit it, but we definitely need to make that known.
And for the rest of the council, I think the intent really too is, to stress to our citizens that, hey, we want to make sure that this is being utilized by the people that are really affected, financially, that it's been hard on them. So that way, you know, if you can pay your utility bills, keep paying it, because that helps other members of our community that may not be in the same position as somebody that can. So I hope that makes sense a little bit, but obviously we want this $500,000 deferment to go as far as we possibly can, and to help the most needy in our community that's been the most affected. That's kind of
Yeah.
the gist that I got out of it.
Yeah, I think that's key though. If you look at the agreement, it doesn't force anybody to improve in need. So to Casey's point, I think it's about the messaging. I don't believe anybody's gonna be turned down. Anybody who wants it can take advantage of it. So I think that's the intent of this agreement.
So if it has to go on further than June, do we have to do a different agreement and have them reapply?
Yeah, this has a finite term, and anything beyond that would have to really be reconsidered as a new agreement, new proposal.
Okay.
Julie, we kind of wanted to keep it within what we're seeing on the national level, you know, on where everything is, and try to keep it in that, and trying to be optimistic that this is going to be done by that point. But you know, obviously nobody knows at this, and I don't think this may not be our last discussion on it. But we wanted to get something out quick, because if the council passes this tonight, we are going to put a note in everybody's utility bills that go out on Thursday, notifying them of this. We're going to put on all our social media platforms. I'm going to do one of my videos tomorrow, hopefully, on it to explain the program and try to get it out in front of the public as much as possible so they know that this is available.
I do want to mention too, for any of the citizens listening, you have the option of either going March, April, May to defer, or April, May, June. So this past month, I think would have counted if you did. Do I have that right?
Yes. If you weren't able to pay your bill this last month, since there's no late fees and there's no shutoffs anyhow, you can roll this into that and then go March, April, May. Anybody have any questions or just more discussion for the committee or me or anybody on this?
It looks really clear to me, and this is as we discussed, so I feel pretty good about it.
With that, I'll entertain a motion to approve it. Anybody?
This is Brian. I move we pass the utility deferment program agreement.
I
Second.
second it.
It's been moved by Brian, seconded by Julie. Laura, you want to call the roll?
Brian,
Yes.
Julie,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Susan,
Yes.
Corey.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. Next item on the agenda is the Santa Fe Rail Trail Historical Society purchase agreement. Scott, I'll let you kind of introduce this and explain to the council what the finance committee came up with.
Yeah, so this is an extension of last week's meeting. This is also, obviously, there's 3 agreements involved in this whole discussion. The lease with Santa Fe Trail, Historical Society, the lease between them and Midland, our lease between the city and Santa Fe, and then there's a trail easement agreement that's involved in all this as well. So, there's a lot of moving parts to this, so it's hard to talk about this specifically without talking about, the Midland piece, which will be following this. But I think the discussion that we had in multiple meetings between the meeting last week and this week with the finance committee is, since Midland had indicated prior to the last meeting that they really only intended to make a purchase of the depot and park, weren't interested in anything else. And with that discussion out in the council, at least those that were in attendance, that wasn't real interest to the council. the fact that Midland articulated at last week's meeting that they would consider a long-term lease. The commitment was to get back to the Budget and Finance Committee, try to come up with something that will work for all parties. And really this piece of it hasn't changed. The fact that they're willing to look at that, I think, makes this workable for everybody. So this would be a piece of that agreement between all three entities, and purchasing this park property from Santa Fe Trail Historical Society, as we discussed last week, for the $100,000 at $5,000 a year, really still makes sense. It makes more sense now that there's potential to work out a lease with Midland. So until we get into the next piece of this, the committee didn't see any reason not to move forward with this part, the purchase of the park. So Corey or Glenn or Blake, Casey, anything I left out that's pertinent to this piece of it?
I would just,
I think we just wanted to kind of make it contingent upon further negotiations with Midland on the lease side of things, right, Scott?
Well, so it's two things. It's that, right? It's really not contingent on that, but it is contingent on negotiating with Midland around the trail easement agreement, because that agreement stipulates that we must lease the depot to Santa Fe Trail Historical Society, and if they want out of this, kind of out of this business of being a landlord, it would require amendment of that agreement as well. So, good point. This purchase of this land would be contingent on Midland and the city agreeing on the trail easement agreement, changes, as well as a lease. So it is a contingent sale or purchase.
And Scott, we have your notes in the Budget and Finance section of the packet, so that was really helpful. We just got those today, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, so we're system challenged a little bit, so we're trying to learn the new technology around the portal and stuff. So apologize for the late entry. It'll get better, but glad you got those ahead of the meeting.
Are there any other questions on this or comments? If not, I will entertain a motion.
So I'll move. I'll make a motion here on this. I'll move that the council authorizes the city administrator to enter into a contract with Santa Fe Historical Society for the purchase of Allen Park in the amount of $100,000, payable in yearly installments of $5,000 for a period of 20 years, sale contingent upon existing agreements with Midland Railway.
There's a second?
Second.
Corey seconds. Lori, you want to call the roll?
Brian,
Aye.
Julie,
Aye.
Scott,
Yes.
Susan,
Aye.
and Corey.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Next item on the agenda is the Midland Railroad Historical Association lease agreement negotiations. Scott, I'm going to let you, as
Okay.
Finance Director, Finance Committee.
Yep. So again, this is directly related to what we just discussed. There was certainly positive movement from Midland last week at the council meeting, and also we got some information from their attorney yesterday that they are interested in exploring a lease, which really made this doable for all parties coming out with something they certainly could work with. So, just to summarize, we've had a lot of meetings. We've committed to go as quickly as possible because Midland and everybody needs to make decisions about go forward plans. So committee met multiple times, did a lot of work, but really the net of it is you talk about the three entities involved: Santa Fe, Midland, in the city. Really, if in talking to all parties, Santa Fe really wants to get out of the landlord business. And at the same time, they'd like to ensure some funding for future operations, in maintaining and promoting all the historical sites that they manage in the community. So that's their intent. That's their ideal scenario here. And you've got Midland and the for-profit company that's involved as well. I mean, they're looking for a way to try to secure a situation with the park and the depot that allows them to do some long-range planning. Their initial ask was, ideally, if we own those properties, we can certainly do our long-range planning. Made sense. The fact that the council wasn't interested in doing that, it really came back to then, would you consider a long-term lease to solve the same problem, to make it long enough that you are able to do planning, and it was at a reasonable cost. So there's opportunity there. And then really, this Budget and Finance Committee thought that, that arrangement where we would lease the properties to Midland, buy the park, from Santa Fe, and lease the properties to Midland, while maintaining the city's position in the trail easement agreement with Midland, would really be what all the entities are looking for. So really, I think what we need to discuss tonight is the interest by the council around that long-term lease with Midland, what that would look like. And really it comes down to, they're already involved in a lease with Santa Fe that has a lot of terms. We would certainly replicate a lot of those terms with the lease that the city would propose to Midland. But really it comes down to, what is the term that the council is comfortable with? What's the rate or the lease rate for that? I mean, those are probably the two big things from a go-forward perspective that we would need to present to Midland, as quickly as possible. So I think that's where we'd open it up for some discussion around term and rate. And I'll pause.
I'll go ahead and start off. I think, I'll just go ahead and say, I think the $1 a year, giving them the same deal that Santa Fe got, is fine, so long as we were able to tighten up some of the things around the easement. Because I do believe that's the city's biggest asset. And what we need to protect most is this ownership and lease transitions.
Yeah, so just some color around that. So the committee did discuss, the rate, what made sense, and certainly, we've provided the depot to Santa Fe for $1 a year, them as a nonprofit organization. And I think the committee decided that made sense since Midland also is a nonprofit. Certainly like to support them in the same way. The fact that there's a for-profit involved really is kind of secondary to, I think, what the city would intend to do for the nonprofit. So recommendation coming out was, the same $1 a year rate. However, there was discussion around, there's other terms here. There's a utility use credit that the city committed to with Midland that currently at the current rates and what the credit involves, the use credit is, it's about $5,000 a year credit on utilities. So, there was discussion around, okay, if we rent to them for a year, does it make sense to pull that credit back because they're still netting $4,000 a year because they're no longer paying Santa Fe the $9,000 a year? So there's things like that I don't think are showstoppers, but certainly need to be considered as far as what the expectation is of Midland in this lease and then the city as well.
So Scott,
any questions around that?
Scott, I have a question. Is the $1 a year just for the depot, or does that include the park also?
So the way these agreements are linked, it really, the lease between Santa Fe and Midland is for both properties. And so I think the intent from the committee is if we purchase the park and we already own the depot, that we would make the same combination and offer that for the same, same dollar a year that we're offering the depot to Santa Fe.
I see.
Yeah, I think that, the intent coming out of the committee too, and I think this, I'm comfortable saying on behalf of the council, is we want to make sure both nonprofits are taken care of one way or the other. They both have value to our community. They both bring value to our community, and we want to make sure they're both sustainable in our community and keep them here. So we had discussion around that, and what does that look like? What is that on a community side? What are we willing to do to keep both nonprofits sustainable and going? Because we both see them as value. Or we saw them as value. So I think that's that was part of it.
Yeah, well said. And if you look at all the agreements, I could not find. I don't think anybody could find where there was actually any requirement to lease the depot or the park to Midland. I mean, I think part of their concern was that's fairly open-ended and non-committal. So that's one thing that we could certainly resolve is, a term that made sense and it was part of the lease agreement. So right now it's almost like a year to year for them, and you can understand the challenges in planning business around that. So that was part of the intent of trying to do something for longer term.
So would the city have any, questions on what Midland could do with the park? Or would it just be open-ended that they could do whatever they want?
Well, Julie, I think you can definitely put some restrictions in there that wouldn't allow them to build any structures or anything like that if that's what you choose. My suggestion would be, if you guys come out with a recommendation or vote on an offer to send over to Midland, that we shoot this over to Blake to negotiate out the terms of the lease with their legal counsel from, if the offer is accepted, then the terms of the lease could be negotiated out by the legal counsels. But that's at the council's discretion.
So that's a great.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
To me, if the city were to buy the park, then that would open it up to a conditional use permit for things like buildings and structures to be placed on there, which would also open it up to public comment too. Glenn, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but.
Oh, that's correct.
Okay, so I think we would have a process there should we go down that route.
Okay, that's good.
Scott, what were you just getting ready to say?
That's a great point. Brian's obviously more versed in that than I am, but identifying all those things up front to make it easier getting through the process. But to Julie's question, looking at the agreement, the lease that Midland already has with Santa Fe Trail Historical Society, I mean, to me, that's a great starting point because it does talk about, use. It does talk about alterations. It talks about most everything I think the city would also want to be concerned about. And so just reading through that, it seemed to be acceptable to Midland, to date, and that'd be a starting point. Obviously changing the, terms around rate and length and all that, but there's definitely language in there that stipulates what the park and depot could be used for.
Okay.
Are there any other questions or discussions for anybody?
Well, I think the other piece, I think it's been proposed, that $1 a year for the rate. I mean, the other piece is the term, right? I think that's the key element in this, and we need to really talk about what the council's comfortable with. It's anywhere from a year, which is kind of what they have, to perpetual, are your two extremes from a term perspective. So definitely want to have some discussion around that, get some perspective.
I'm not uncomfortable with perpetuity at all, just so long as, you know, there's some protective language in there for the easement, that if they were to dissolve or move or relocate, that the easement would be protected in that situation.
I agree 100%. I have no problem with it being perpetual, because there's no point in having a depot without a railroad, as long as we have protective language in there.
Yep.
Right, and with the easement, Santa Fe Trail would have to be removed from that, because as of in the first, I think it's the first part of it, says that the city must lease the depot to Santa Fe for $1, etc. That would have to be removed, and that would have to be substituted.
Yeah, I'm good with perpetual as well for the reasons that everybody's stated.
Any other discussion?
I think the only other thing, Casey, would be, we talked in the committee, was the utility credit piece. The recommendation coming out of the committee was that, you know, since we're reducing the annual lease payment from $9,000 to $1, that, you know, I think the city would be interested in removing that utility credit from the trail easement agreement, which is currently valued at about $5,000. So there's still a net positive for Midland with this new agreement, and the city's no longer having to carry that $5,000 credit going forward. So interested in thoughts from the council on that.
Well, I think that makes perfect sense to go ahead and have the utilities for non-payment and back to the city.
Any other discussion or thoughts on that?
What would be the benefits of either keeping it in there or removing it? Just discussion.
The benefits for which party?
The city.
Well, I mean, the benefits to the city is, you know, it's $5,000 a year that we'd be gaining in utilities, and really what that would do, you know, what that effectively would do is pay for the park, you know, the $5,000 a year for the park. So it'd be kind of a net neutral event from a cost perspective for the city in this three-way arrangement. So that's what it would do for the city. It's a $5,000 bill we would be.
Right. I mean, that's a fine starting point. I think that's a fair offer.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree too.
Okay. With that, I guess, does somebody want to make a motion for the offer to be sent over to Midland?
So is it a motion for an offer, or is it a motion to negotiate it? Because there's a lot of questions that I think Julie had around use, and what's typically done here?
Typically, you'd authorize whoever is negotiating to enter into negotiations.
Okay.
And by the looks of this letter, that would be Blake. Is that the way I'm reading this?
I believe that's the mayor's recommendation, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's what, I mean, Blaine Finch, the attorney representing Midland in this, has said that was their preference, was that the attorneys kind of negotiate. And then, I mean, y'all have obviously given me a lot of direction here on the route the council wishes to go. And then I can bring that back to whoever, the finance committee, if that's the way that we want to go, and discuss it there and continue negotiations before we officially bring something back to the council.
And for speed of things, like I said, especially with this virtual meeting stuff, if Blake were to, Blake and Blaine were to work out something fairly quickly, we can always call a special meeting.
Right.
to get this wrapped up so we can, we can put this behind us.
Good point.
With that, I guess we'll just need a motion for Blake to enter in or to submit the offer to Blaine Finch, the attorney assigned by Midland for further negotiation or for the lease agreement.
I motion we authorize the city attorney to negotiate with Midland's attorney for the lease agreement.
Second.
Who seconded it? Is that Susan?
Yep.
Okay. Corey, motion. Seconded. Laura, you want to call the roll? Did we lose Laura?
Can't hear you.
Muted. You're
I-
muted, Laura.
Yeah, I can hear.
I lost my trackpad underneath my papers. I'm sorry. Brian,
Yes.
Julie,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Susan,
Yes.
Corey.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. Next, new business certificate of deposit bids. Glenn, do you want to brief the council on this?
Yeah, this is a continuation of the investments in CDs. Every 6 months, we have another CD that rolls over, and we sent out last month an RFP again, as we have, and we got 2 responses. One from Mid-America, the other one here from Kansas State, and we're recommending Mid-America's because they're coming in with a much higher yield at a 1.36 on this latest one. So kind of continues the trend that we've seen. There's a little bit lower interest rate on this one, and I believe that's due to the volatility that we're seeing in the markets right now and all the uncertainty around what the economy is doing right now and will do. So it's a little bit lower, but it's still higher than what we were doing a year or two. So we're going to recommend Mid-America Bank on this one.
Are there any questions or discussions on that? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
This is Brian. I move the city accept the certificate of deposit bid from Mid-America Bank for 1.35% for 2 years.
I second it.
Moved
is
by
Julie.
Brian, seconded by Julie. Laura, you want to call the roll?
Brian,
Aye.
Julie,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Susan,
Yes.
Corey.
Yes.
Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is the council meeting time. Guys, I put this on here. I heard from some of you that, 7 o'clock's great when we're all working. But with this virtual stuff that, maybe we want to entertain an earlier time. So I just wanted kind of the council to discuss and see what they thought now that we have had earlier 4 o'clock meetings and now 7 o'clock meetings to see where you guys want to go. It doesn't really matter to me, but I didn't know through this pandemic stuff that we're dealing with if we wanted to meet earlier versus evening. But I'm going to leave that at the discretion of the council.
I'd be fine with earlier.
I'm
Well,
flexible.
I think since I'm the only one that's retired, whatever the council wants to do is fine with me.
I'm retired also.
Doesn't matter.
Oh. Yeah, but
So-
you have little kids
I don't
too.
think that's, no, not the same.
Scott, Corey, what do you guys think?
So, I mean, I'm flexible. My only concern is, earlier works, I can make it work. My only concern is not everybody's not working and not everybody can necessarily carve out a time during the workday. I'm just afraid it's going to exclude some people that may want to attend. That would be my only concern.
Well, and I definitely don't want to do that. I just didn't know why we're doing these virtual things since anybody can, pull it up on their phone or whatever, or listen if we just wanted to be a little early. It literally doesn't matter to me. I mean, we could even do a 5:30. So that way it gives people time to get home. Not a 4, but not a 7. So it's
Has there been any input from the community or at all, or you just?
no, we just wanted to have the discussion since we had two different 4 o'clock meetings. Now that we've kind of experienced that, if that would be something the council would be interested in. And if not, like I said, guys, I am perfectly fine leaving it at 7.
I don't know if we can go get community input, but I'd line up with, if there isn't any community preference with whatever the rest of the council wants to do, I'd like to make sure we're not excluding anybody by doing it during the work day.
Absolutely. I agree.
So is there a way to go get that input at all, or just ask for some feedback?
It's social media again, but we might be able to ask Lynn to put up some sort of survey on the city's Facebook page and just kind of see what people's response was. Now with that, I will say if we did do this, I only want it to be during this virtual meeting time. And if we go back to, the normal meetings in person, how we used to do it, to move it back to 7, because I do know that, especially, I know some of us work out of town some days and it's hard to get there even by 7 sometimes. So I was just thinking during this time, during this pandemic, but Glenn, what do you think? This affects the city staff too. So I'd like to hear from you guys.
Well, yeah, I think the city staff would probably, vote for an earlier time because that's during the normal work hours for us. But, the council meetings for the council and the public. So whatever you guys want to do, whatever you're comfortable with, that's what really should be the decision point.
Well, why don't we do this, Glenn? Why don't we have Lynn put up a survey on Facebook for the next week? And let's see what type of response we get. And then we'll base our decision off of that, because that's something we can move just before we post the next agenda.
Sure.
Depending on what the community says. Does that sound good to everybody?
It sounds good.
Yeah,
Sounds
that's good.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is the employee handbook, declared pandemic. I'm going to let Laura speak to this a little bit. It concerns checking our employees for temperatures when they come in to work and different things like that. So I'm gonna let Laura or Glenn. I guess Glenn, you can also speak to this because it was your guys'.
Yeah, Laura's been really working hard on this more than I have. It's kind of an HR issue, so she's been all over a lot of changes that have happened, and the world has changed in the past month. Hard to keep up with everything that's been changing in the HR world, insurance and everything else, but she's done a great job keeping up with that. So I'd let her speak to that before I did. So go ahead, Laura.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can hear you.
Yes.
Mike Patrick had attended a virtual meeting earlier this week, and he brought something to our attention that we're very interested in, and that's regarding our employees and the process that we go through and checking temperatures to make sure that we're protecting that employee plus their fellow employees. Lawrence is putting this in place as well. But what it will require for us is to add a page in our personnel handbook that talks exactly about that. So that gives us the support and lets our employees know exactly what we're doing. I know we're going to discuss this a little more with our department heads at our meeting tomorrow, but they have a heads up. They know that this is possibly coming if the council is in agreement with this. It's just another safety measure, another step for us to take. And it's all going to be based on whether we can get the thermometers, and Mike is working on that.
Any
Is there
thoughts
anything-
or questions?
Glenn?
Any thoughts or questions from the council?
I think it's a great idea. Anything that we can do to keep our employees safe, I think it's a great idea.
Okay. If there's no more discussions or questions, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
This is Brian. I move we approve the declared pandemic policy for the employee handbook.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
It's Scott, I'll second.
Scott second. Laura, call the roll.
Brian,
Aye.
Julie,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Corey?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. Council committee reports, budget and finance. Scott.
We really haven't been doing a lot, but no. So I just want to take this to the beginning of this time just to thank the committee and staff, for the large effort that went into moving as quickly as we were able to around the utility deferment proposal and the whole Depot Santa Fe Trail Historical Society. So several meetings, long hours, a lot of people committed to making it work. So I was thankful and impressed with everybody's dedication to step up and do that. Just want to get that out to the community as well. Next meeting is scheduled. We have it on the calendar for Friday. I'd like to keep that at 7:45 a.m. I think on the agenda, at least at this time, we still need to discuss the sewer rates, about that issue post-pandemic, or when we come out of the other side. It'd be nice to have a plan in place around the rate structure there that's been kind of on our plate here for several months. Then also the Budget IQ project, I want to move forward on that. Also set the 2021 budget calendar, including planning time meetings, et cetera, so we can come back to the council and say, this is the plan to finalize the 2021 budget with, with meeting dates and agendas. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Scott. Community development, Susan.
No update.
All right, public health and safety, Corey.
No update. I'm going to try and get send Susan and Laura a email trying to figure out a time to get together for a Zoom meeting. We do have a couple issues still on the horizon. One, just any kind of COVID-19 discussion. I know a lot of that's being done at the city and county level, just as far as the committee goes. Chit chat about that. And then also the truck route, protecting the brick streets. That discussion, we still have a lot to build on that. And Ed was going to reach out and check on some possible state funding. And we still need to get together and hear back from him. So we'll probably try and set something up on Zoom and maybe have something at a council meeting.
Okay. Public works and utilities, Brian.
No update.
Legislative committee, Julie.
I have nothing to report.
City administrator staff comments.
Nothing further from me.
Okay. Council comments. Anything further?
I'll just make one more comment, thanking staff, Laura, Lynn, everybody pulling these Zoom meetings together, learning the technology, not trivial. And they've been a tremendous asset and be able to continue to city business, under the current environment. So personally want to thank them publicly.
Our pleasure.
Yeah, and I'd like to thank the finance committee. I mean, like Scott said, there's a lot of meetings in the last couple weeks. So I appreciate everybody's, and Glenn's and Blake's, everybody's willingness to come together to try to get that resolved as timely as we possibly could. So thank you guys. With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Julie's moved to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Corey has seconded it. Laura, can you call the roll?
Brian,
Yes.
Julie,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Susan,
Yes.
Corey.
Yes.
Motion passes. We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
We'll
Thanks.
start at 8:05.